You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. Coaches poll came out yesterday. Noles preseason number 8. Too high, too low? About what you expected? What do you think?
I think it's about what I expected. I've kind of been saying I think they're a preseason top 5, top 10 team. I mean, obviously we're going to learn a whole bunch about this Florida State team in the first month, and we're going to learn if they're kind of worthy of that rating between the LSU game and they play Clemson at Clemson on September 23rd, week 4.
I would assume all the conversations there begin with Jordan Travis. Yeah, I mean, what's a veteran guy, comes back for another year, we all understand. How's he looking so far in fall camp?
I think he's looked good. I mean, he has quite a few weapons all around him that make his job pretty easy, but it's been pretty remarkable. I can't recall too many developments like his kind of as a passer. I mean, he's come a long way from a guy who I think was kind of purely a rusher while he started to where he is now. Is, I mean, a Heisman conversation guy with Jaden Daniels. But yeah, when you've got, I mean, Trey Benson in the backfield with you and a few other guys, we've got Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman at wide receiver. When you've got a guy like Jaheim Bell at tight end, they make him look good, no doubt, but he looks good as well.
Everyone's talked about their returning production stat, right? Florida State number 1 in the country in returning production from a year ago. Where are they thin? Or where is the question mark or question marks on this team?
Truthfully, the one I would point to, and it's not even that, like, I think they have a few guys you like, but they have some questions beyond kind of the starting few, is at linebacker, where they have a few guys in Kalen DeLoach and Tatum Bethune who are back, who've played a lot of football at this level. And they have a third guy in DJ Lundy. They really only played 2, sometimes 3 at a time. They win a lot on the 4-2-5 last year defensively, I think kind of because of their situation there. Behind them, there are some real questions. It's not to say there haven't been some guys who look good this preseason, but there's guys who haven't played as much football, and kind of it'll be interesting to see how the 2 deep gets sorted out there. And I mean, if they have an injury or two, things start getting a little interesting at linebacker. But that's really my main question, honestly.
You know, the Curt Weiler is with us, covers Florida State for Osceola, part of the Rivals Networks. By the way, do you say Osceola or Osceola? How do people say it there?
The first one, Osceola.
Osceola. Okay. Always wondering. One of the coolest traditions, by the way. I'm not pandering. I love, like, the flaming spear. That's like Renegade the horse. It's one of the coolest freaking things in the world. Anyway, we know, like, here people are having conversations about guys that are returning that are primed for maybe a step-up year. People here are talking about wide receiver Kyron Lacey, for example. Is there a guy that's been there at Florida State, though, that this is an opportunity to say, hey, keep an eye on him because it might be breakthrough, breakout type year?
So I point to a guy, I mean, he started at cornerback last year. He kind of wasn't, I mean, he's not probably a household name, but amongst all the transfers they brought in, I mean, I mentioned a guy like Kalen DeLoach. I think he'll have a bigger year on kind of a national stage. I think another guy, too, I look at is the cornerback, Renardo Green. They brought in Central Cypress from Virginia, and he's looked good. He was an all-ACC guy last year at Virginia, but Renardo Green's another of those guys who's kind of been around. There aren't a ton of them who've kind of been around since even kind of predating Mike Norvell in Tallahassee, but I think he's a guy who's kind of gradually kind of floated between quarterback and safety and has kind of settled at cornerback last year. I thought had his best season, and I think could carry that over into this season for sure. I mean, it's not the flashiest position, but I think he is a guy, kind of one of the guys who's hung around, and I think could see his reputation nationally increase this year.
Is the energy and sort of the build-up and the hype around this game there palpable? I mean, I know a couple of years ago Florida State opened with Notre Dame down in Orlando, the LSU game last year in New Orleans, but how does this one compare to some of the other maybe marquee season openers the Noles have played?
Oh, I think there's a lot more hype around this one. I'm sure probably for LSU as well as Florida State. I mean, it's last year, I think there were real questions about both Florida State and LSU in terms of, I mean, is this a top 25 team? Neither of them ranked at the time, and obviously by season's end, it was proven that both the teams were pretty good. Now, I mean, are these teams conference contenders, or are these teams more? I mean, they're both, like you said, they're both top 8 in the polls, and so I think it's you don't want to overreact too much to one game. Whoever wins or loses that game, obviously, the loser of that game can still achieve all their goals. It's not ruining their season by any means, but I mean, no, it's we all want to see more games like this at kind of the highest level for sure.
Yeah, it is interesting because the one thing that's true about the 14 playoff is there's never been a 2-loss team. So while you're right, whoever loses this game they can still achieve whatever they want to achieve. Their margin for error though really gets to almost nil. So it's significant for a couple teams that have national championship aspirations. I did want to ask you about Daryl Jackson as well, who had a defensive lineman. We talked about the story the other day. He was trying to transfer in from Miami. He'd already transferred once, so he tried to get a waiver, and it was denied. Can you give us an update there? Like, is there any feeling as to whether or not that appeal is going to get approved, or if he's going to have to sit this year?
So they're through the appeal. I think they were already denied. I think over the summer they appealed, and the appeal was what got denied. I think they've kind of gone through all their NCAA options. I mean, it's an unfortunate circumstance. So the NCAA on January 11th voted to kind of be, hey, we're going to be stricter unless you have like a personal medical reason or like I think a safety issue, like something happened to make you feel unsafe where you were. We're not going to approve a second-time transfer, and they're going to have to sit. The problem is Daryl Jackson's already enrolled at that point. Like he transferred and came home to be closer to his mom who has a medical condition before that. So there's some definite frustration because I think he may not have done that even to be closer to his mom if he knew it was going to kind of cost him a year of eligibility because he was going to be, either a starter or a backup. He was absolutely going to be in the 2 deep. And Mike Norvell talked a little yesterday about there's still some options to explore, but kind of he didn't share what those were. And outside of legal action, which I don't anticipate, I don't know what else can be done. It seems like he's going to miss the year.
What does that mean for, you mentioned he would be somewhere in the 2 deep. So where does that leave Florida State on the interior of that defensive line?
It's still a very solid group. It's not I think they still have plenty of options, but it becomes if you lose a guy or two more, then you start to, it's just like you're losing a guy, not even to an injury before the season even starts. But that's still a group. They got Fabian Lovett to come back, which was a big deal. They added a guy in Western Michigan, defensive tackle transfer, Braden Fisk, who's looked really good early this preseason. He's been quite impactful. Daryl Jackson's high school teammate, actually, Josh Farmer's on the team at the same position, and he, I think, has looked good and been impressive this offseason. They have a few other guys there as well. So they still feel good, but it is kind of that first steps hit where you're like, you hope this isn't the first of 4 guys they lose because then they would be in trouble.
Yeah. I remember Fisk from Western Michigan. That's a guy LSU was targeting as well. Tigers really went heavy on the interior defensive line in the portal as well this year. He's a really good player. Wrapping up here with Curt Weiler. A couple more minutes from Osceola, part of the Rivals Network. You can get him on Twitter at Curt M. Weiler. That's Curt with a C. I do want to ask before you go about the whole realignment conversation. Clearly, there's just a lot of uneasiness and frustration surrounding the ACC, the TV deal. Florida State's been very public about their displeasure. Give me your sense here, Curt. You're there every day, boots on the ground, covering this team. What's going to happen? What's a realistic path for Florida State here?
Yeah, the truth of the matter is, so they have what, I think a little less than a week. I think it's August 15th is when they have to, if they were going to let the ACC know, hey, we're leaving next summer. We're leaving for kind of the 2024-25 academic year. And I think it seemed like there was more buzz about that. It's kind of fallen off a bit just because the truth is, I think if Florida State had an easy path out, it would have taken it by now. I think the truth of the matter is the grant of rights has been looked at a lot, and it is going to have to be tested in the court of law if Florida State wants to get out. That's kind of the path at this point. It would be very expensive. Both, you have a buyout fee. If you weren't able to get if you lost in court, you wouldn't have your television rights, which would make you significantly less valuable if you're a conference trying to add Florida State. You can't broadcast their games. That hurts their value. So they would have to have a belief that we could win our rights in a court of law, and it would be about $120 million exit fee. So that's why, they've talked about the need to get out because, that revenue gap's only going to grow, but it is by no means as easy as fans would hope, and it is.
What's your best guess as to what happens? Does the ACC just continue under this current rights deal for 13 more years?
I don't think it makes it 13 years, but I think it makes it at least a few more, and maybe as 2030 creeps up and the number to get out becomes a little more reasonable, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But in the imminent future, as of now, I'm not sure what happens because I think it would be very, very expensive to do it at this point of time, and the ACC is not motivated to work with Florida State. Florida State's kind of trying to, in the interim, think getting a bigger piece of the pie, and I don't think the ACC is exactly motivated to work with Florida State because I think the ACC realizes Florida State will get out the first chance it gets.
Wow. Do you think Florida State will leave the ACC?
At some point.
Wow.
I don't know exactly when, but yes, I think at some point. I mean, I think it feels like we're heading towards a few power conferences, and it does not feel like Florida State is one of them, kind of top to bottom when you look at the roster they've assembled. I think, long term, with the moves the Big 12 is making, I think that looks like a more desirable conference than the ACC right now. And the ACC is looking at Cal and Stanford and SMU, but those don't really move the needle.
Man, the realignment conversation is pretty fascinating because it's shaping the landscape of the game we all love. But in the meantime, we got actual real football about less than a month away in Florida State and in LSU down in Orlando, and the premier game of kickoff weekend. Curt Weiler, Osceola, part of the Rivals Network. He's on Twitter at Curt M. Weiler. Y'all give him a follow. Hey, man, we appreciate a couple of minutes. Thanks so much.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.